"You'll ruin the photos," my sister blurted out. Mom added, "Let her shine, just don't come." I stayed silent. 3 weeks later, I bought her dream venue and cancelled her wedding the night before. A quiet vengeance. I'm Jacob, 28. And if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that silence is sometimes far more eloquent than any argument. I was never the center of attention in my family. That spot always belonged to my sister, Ashley. She's 2 years younger than me, but anyone would have thought she was the firstborn by the way everyone adored her. She grew up being the golden child, the kind of person who could spill juice on the carpet and be praised for creatively expressing herself, while I was scolded for breathing too loudly. My mother idolized her. My father, for his part, stayed on the sidelines, a silent, yet complicit, observer. I used to believe that was just how families worked. Some got the spotlight, others settled for the scraps. It didn't bother me. Or, maybe it did, but I got very good at pretending it didn't. It wasn't all terrible, of course. There were moments, on birthdays or movie nights, when everything felt normal. Ashley wasn't this self-centered hurricane, and my mother wasn't fueling the storm. But those moments became rarer as we got older. Ashley learned that the world would bend to her will if she pushed hard enough, and my mother held it up for my sister to trample all over at her leisure. I was the sensitive one, the one who misinterpreted things. Every slight was minimized, every insult was dismissed as a simple joke. Over time, my only defense was silence, a distant, hermetic calm. By the time I hit my 20s, I had forged a life that barely touched theirs. I had my own apartment, my own friends, and a small digital marketing agency that was just starting to take off. I didn't brag about my achievements on social media or make comments of false modesty. I just worked, something Ashley never had to do. She bounced from job to job, chasing dreams and abandoning them as quickly as she found them, because there was always someone, usually my mother, to clean up the mess. When Ashley met Ethan, her fiancé, I honestly thought things might change. He was a quiet, sensible, and polite person, as if he'd been raised by a completely different species than ours. I liked him. He made Ashley more bearable. So, when they got engaged, I braced myself. I knew there would be drama, but I never expected to be at the center of the stage. It all started with a small text message, almost an afterthought. "Hey, the wedding is June 17th. Try not to wear anything weird." That was it. No, can't wait to see you. No formal invitation. Just a reminder not to embarrass her. I stared at the message, locked my phone, and went back to work. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but from a lack of surprise. That was so typical of Ashley. A week later, my mother called, a sharp tone in her voice. "Did you see Ashley's message?" "You didn't reply." I told her I had seen it, but it didn't require a response. "You always take everything as a personal attack," she sighed. "Just be happy for your sister. It's her big moment." Her big moment, always her moment. I remained polite, assured her I would go, that I would wear a simple suit and not get in anyone's way. My mother didn't thank me. She simply said, "Good. Don't make this about you." A few days later, Ashley called. I thought maybe she wanted to talk about the ceremony or ask for help, or just connect like normal siblings. Instead, she got straight to the point. "I talked to the photographer," she said. "We're going with very clean, elegant tones, no loud colors or distractions. And that includes you, by the way." I asked her what she meant, and she hesitated. "I mean, could you trim your beard, and, maybe, not stand so close in the family photos? You would just ruin the photos." She said it so casually, as if she were talking about tablecloths or centerpieces. As if I were an annoying accessory she had to work around. A long silence took over my end of the line. I didn't know what to say, and I think she took it as agreement. "Great," she said before hanging up. I sat on my sofa, my phone still in my hand, staring out the window. That's what people like Ashley are like. They push and push, and because they've never been told no, they don't even realize when they've crossed the line. And my mother, she would always defend her. Always. 2 days later, another call, this time from my mother. "I know Ashley called you," she said. "And I think maybe you should just let her have her moment. If it stresses her out to have you there, maybe it's just better if you don't go." I didn't say anything. It wasn't from surprise, because deep down I had expected it, but from the pain it caused me. "You understand, right?" she added. "Just this once." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Of course," I said. "Just this once." After hanging up, I didn't cry, or get angry. I didn't throw my phone or punch a wall. I just sat there, completely motionless, for what felt like an hour. I felt an emptiness in my chest. Not because I wasn't going to the wedding, but because I wasn't even worth a half-hearted excuse. They wanted me out, and they didn't even bother to sugarcoat it. I was a stain on Ashley's big day, a blur in her meticulous photo shoot. 3 weeks passed with no news from anyone. Not Ashley, not my mother, not even Ethan. I retreated into my work. I signed 3 new clients, hit a new monthly income record, and moved to a larger office. But not a word from them. It was as if I had never existed. Until one day, I got a notification on my phone, an email forwarded by a mutual friend of Ethan's and mine. It was a thank you note from the wedding venue. Apparently, they had just finalized the deposit for a massive ceremony package at a picturesque estate just outside the city, a place Ashley had dreamed of since she was 16. It was incredibly expensive, far beyond their budget. I assumed my mother had pulled strings, or Ethan's family had contributed. But when I looked closer, something caught my eye. The reservation was in Ashley's name, but the contact person was someone I knew and who owed me a favor. That's when the idea germinated in my mind. It wasn't out of malice, at first. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. They didn't want me at the wedding, fine. But that didn't mean I wouldn't be involved, even if they didn't know it yet. I didn't act immediately. I let the idea simmer while I went about. My usual routine: work, gym, dinner, sleep, and repeat. But something had changed. There was a tension in my chest I couldn't shake, as if my body knew something was coming before my mind could process it. I kept replaying the conversation with my mother. Her voice, calm and dismissive, still echoed in my head. "Let her have her moment," she had said, as if I were a hindrance, a distraction. As the days went by, more details were added to the list. The family chats, for example. They hadn't technically removed me, but they might as well have. No one responded when I wrote something. My cousin Michael asked if anyone needed a ride from the airport. My aunt offered to help with the floral arrangements. Ashley shared a blurred photo of her dress, of course. "Don't look, guys," she wrote. I commented, just out of courtesy, "Looks great. Hope everything goes well." Not a single reply. A few days later, my mother posted a Facebook status. It was rare, as she usually used social media to spy on relatives or share strange recipe videos. But there it was. "So proud of my beautiful daughter. Can't wait to watch her walk down the aisle. You deserve everything, sweetie. Some people come into this world shining, and Ashley has always been one of them." It affected me more than I expected, not for what she said, but for what she didn't. I wasn't in the photo collage she attached. Even though one of the photos was from a family vacation I had paid for 4 years earlier, a trip to Florida where Ashley had forgotten her wallet and I had to cover half the expenses, so the thing wasn't a disaster. There we were, Dad, Mom, Ashley, and Ethan, all smiling on the beach, except I had been cropped out. I remembered the original photo. I was standing right next to my father. I didn't comment. I didn't point out the mistake. I simply saved the post in a folder I called Reminders. Then came the bridal shower at a tea room downtown. Obviously, I wasn't invited, but I didn't expect to be. What I did expect was for no one to mention me, just to ignore me, to leave me out, but not to mock me. I was wrong. That night, a friend of mine, Isla, who worked part-time at the tea room, sent me a voice message. "Jacob," she said, laughing softly, "you're not going to believe what your sister said today." I braced myself. They were opening gifts, and someone gave her a digital photo frame, Isla continued. And she joked, "I guess I'll have to filter out the weirdos in the family before I upload anything." And then she added, and I quote, "Honestly, I'm glad Jacob isn't coming. He has an awkward energy, like he's always judging everyone." There was a pause. "And your mom," Isla went on, laughing. "Well, he's always been a little jealous of Ashley. It's not his fault. He just never found his way." That part hurt more than the rest. I had found my way. I had worked hard to build a life on my own. No one gave me a down payment for rent or covered my expenses when I struggled. I learned to code from YouTube tutorials and built my business with an old laptop in a studio with moisture stains on the ceiling. And yet, they saw me as a nobody. Or worse, as a joke. But the final push came a week before the wedding. I had arranged to meet Ethan for coffee. He had texted me unexpectedly, "Hey man, long time no see. Want to catch up?" I was surprised. Honestly, I thought he was just playing along with Ashley to avoid conflict. We met anyway, and I noticed he looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, as if he were constantly walking on eggshells. "You okay?" I asked. He stirred his coffee, his eyes fixed on the table. "Not really," he admitted. "I didn't know how messy things were with your family. Ashley told me you didn't want to come, That you'd be a distraction. I let out a short, bitter laugh. A distraction from what? Her delusions. He didn't answer, just looked at me with something that almost resembled guilt. I'm just saying, he murmured after a pause, you didn't deserve that. There was a moment of silence. I watched him closely. So, why are you marrying her? He looked up, startled. I mean, I added, you're not stupid, you can't tell me you haven't seen it. Ethan exhaled slowly. Because I love her. And because, I guess, I thought marrying her would make the rest of it easier. It was such a naive thing to say that I almost felt sorry for him, but I didn't press it. He sounded like a man trying to convince himself he had made the right decision. When we got up to leave, he hesitated for a moment and pulled an envelope from his jacket. Ashley told me not to give you one, he said, handing it to me, but I thought you should have it anyway. It was the official wedding invitation. Thick paper, gold trim, embossed lettering. I took it, but didn't thank him. When I got home, I didn't open it. I simply put it in the reminders folder. At this point, the idea that had been brewing in my head was no longer just an idea. It was a plan. And I was ready to act. They wanted a perfect day and had made sure I wasn't part of it. Perfect. But they forgot one thing. The dream venue that Ashley had booked, the one she posted about in all caps, the one that made her cry with excitement when the reservation was confirmed. She didn't own it. Not yet. But I knew the owner. And I had just wired the deposit. I didn't cancel the reservation immediately. That would have been too easy, too obvious. No, I needed her to feel safe, for her world to be perfectly in place. So I let time run its course. I watched her as she navigated the final stretch of her fairy tale plans, thinking everything was on track. Her custom dress, her hired florist, the booked catering service. I even silently watched her daily Instagram posts, 10 days until I become Mrs. Ethan Lane, with little white heart emojis and a photo of her ring. 7 days to go. Dream venue, dream dress, dream life. Each post seemed aimed directly at me. Not because it excluded me, that was a given, but because there was an air of triumph in her tone. It was as if this wedding wasn't just a celebration of love, but a victory lap over me. Over the awkward brother, the jealous son, the secondary character in her perfect story. I started getting messages from distant relatives, people who hadn't texted me in years. Most were polite and asked if I was attending, if I needed help with my outfit. Some were passive-aggressive. A cousin wrote, "So sorry about the misunderstanding. Hope you and Ashley can make peace for the big day." That word, misunderstanding, made me want to laugh. It's amazing how people who weren't present for a single conversation suddenly felt qualified to be peacemakers. But the final breaking point, the moment that broke something deep inside me, came 3 days before the wedding. I got a call from my father. That, in itself, was strange. He was always a distant figure, someone who watched from the sidelines and avoided conflict as if it were his full-time job. But this time, his voice was sharp. "Jacob," he said, "your mother tells me you're still holding a grudge." I blinked. "Excuse me." "It's your sister's wedding," he continued. "And no matter what disagreements there have been, family shows up. Family supports each other." I laughed, genuinely confused. Like the way Mom supported Ashley by telling me not to come, or the way Ashley said I would ruin the photos. He paused, but only for a second. Ashley is under a lot of stress. She didn't mean it. There it was. That old, familiar tune. She didn't mean it. As if words only counted when they were convenient. "I'm not going," I said flatly. "You're being petty," he said. That phrase hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was harsh, but because it came from him, the only person in the family who usually stayed out of it, who never took sides. But now, when he spoke, it was to tell me to fall in line, to shut up, and to do my part. "You know what's funny?" I said softly. "You've barely talked to me all year. But suddenly, now that I might ruin Ashley's big moment, I'm worth a phone call." "Don't twist things, Jacob," he said. I hung up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw my phone. I simply walked to my refrigerator, got a glass of water, and sat in silence. My hand was shaking slightly, not with rage, but with something colder and more penetrating, like a betrayal settling into my bones, intertwining with old wounds I thought had already healed. That night, I opened the wedding invitation Ethan had given me. I stared at the gold-trimmed card, the elegant calligraphy, the poetic line at the bottom, "Together with their families." I almost laughed again. Together with their families, as if I had ever been part of that picture. And then, I received an email. It was from the wedding venue. "Hi, Jacob. Just to confirm the transfer of ownership for the June 17th reservation. Since you have officially acquired the property, we will proceed under your name. Please let us know if there's anything else we can help you with. Ownership. Not just the reservation, but the venue. A few years earlier, I had helped a friend, Nate, get his event business off the ground. It was a loan, a favor, and when he finally made it, he promised he would pay me back, but also give me a piece of the next opportunity that came his way. That opportunity came in the form of a rustic estate just outside the city, a popular wedding venue. Nate offered me first dibs when he decided to retire. I hadn't planned to take it, real estate wasn't in my plans. But when I saw Ashley's name on the client list, I quietly, cleanly bought it. No drama, no announcements, just paperwork, signatures, and a bank transfer. The wedding venue was no longer rented. It was mine. 2 days before the wedding, I got another text from Ethan. Can we talk? I ignored it. 1 day before the wedding, Ashley posted a story from her rehearsal dinner. Clinking champagne glasses, everyone laughing, her twirling in a white dress. Tomorrow is going to be perfect, she wrote. And it almost was. Almost. But as the sun set on that final night, something shifted. At 9:43 p.m., Ashley texted me. I hadn't heard from her directly since the call where she told me I'd ruined the photos. Her message said, "Did you mess with the venue?" I stared at the screen. My heart was calm, serene. Then, at 10:12 p.m., I got a second text, this one from my mother. Tell me this is a mistake. Jacob, please. Ashley is crying. And finally, at 10:45 p.m., Ethan called. I let it ring and then turned my phone off completely. The dream was cracking, and the silence, this time, was deafening. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I just sat on the edge of my bed, watching the soft blue glow of my turned-off phone as if it were a ticking bomb. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing by on the street. There was no satisfaction, no euphoria of victory, just stillness. The kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes you wonder if you're still breathing. At some point, around 2 a.m., I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. My reflection in the dark windows stared back at me, calm, composed, and utterly empty. I thought I would feel triumphant, as if I had finally balanced the scales after a lifetime of being sidelined. But instead, I just felt tired, heavy, because deep down, a part of me still wanted someone, anyone, to understand. Not to agree, not to apologize, just to understand the why. But that wasn't going to happen. In the morning, my phone was full of messages. Some furious, some pleading. My mother called 4 times. Ashley sent me a 1-minute, 22-second voice note of shaky breathing and rage-filled sobs, ending with a, "You've ruined everything. I hope you're happy, Jacob. I really do." And then, Ethan, unlike the others, his message was brief. "I get it now. I'm sorry." That message got to me. Not because it justified anything, which it didn't, but because it was the first sign, maybe the only one, that someone in that family mess finally saw behind the curtain. But it didn't change the consequences. The wedding was officially cancelled at noon. The venue, my venue, issued a statement citing logistical conflicts. And while they reimbursed most of the costs, the emotional damage was already done. Photos and videos started disappearing from Ashley's social media. Her countdowns vanished. Her bio changed from future wife to simply heartbroken. And then the text messages stopped. The calls went silent. The storm had passed. But the silence that followed was not one of peace, but of punishment. By the end of that week, I was completely cut off. My mother blocked me on everything, her way of ensuring I couldn't hurt the family any further. My father sent one last text. "You've made your decision. I hope it was worth it." No one asked why. No one came to hear my side. They just shut the door and locked it. From the inside. I spent the next few days following a routine. Wake up, work, shower, eat something bland, pretend not to notice how quiet everything felt. My apartment, which used to be a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a quarantine zone. No one visited. No notifications. Even my friends, the few who weren't close to Ashley, gave me space. Isla texted once or twice to check in, but my replies were short. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to defend what I had done, but I didn't want to be there either. One night, I found myself driving aimlessly, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I drove past the old neighborhood, the house where I grew up, and saw the porch light on. I stopped across the street and just stared. It was surreal how small it looked. The house that had held so many birthdays, arguments, and cold dinners. As a child, it had seemed enormous. Now it seemed to belong in a snow globe, pretty, silent, and sealed off. The curtains were drawn. I could see silhouettes moving inside. Laughter. I knew who they were laughing with, and I knew who they weren't laughing with. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just sat there for a long time, and then I started the engine again. The next morning, I called my real estate agent. "Put the place up for sale," I said. "Sell it." She was surprised. "You just bought it." "Exactly," I said. It served its purpose. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't regret. It was clarity. I had spent my whole life trying to be included, trying to earn a seat at the table by being quiet, still, being the mature one. But maybe some tables just weren't worth it. So I let go. I sold the venue. I put my business on hold. I booked a trip. Spain first, then maybe Portugal, somewhere warm where no one knew my name. I didn't make a big deal of it. No social media posts, no messages about a new chapter. I just packed a bag, left a key for my neighbor, and got on the plane. I looked out the window as the clouds folded beneath us like waves. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running away from something. I felt like I was walking away. And walking away, I realized, is sometimes the only power you have left. Spain was silent, but in the best way. Not the kind of silence that suffocates you like at home, but the kind that fills your lungs. Clean, easy-to-breathe air. My first morning in Seville, I sat at a small cafe with a coffee so strong it nearly knocked me off my chair, watching people pass by with no idea who I was or what I had done. There was something strangely comforting about being completely irrelevant. No expectations, no baggage, just a guy with a travel bag and a decent tan starting to form. The first week, I barely checked my phone. I didn't care what the fallout was back home. I didn't care who was talking, who was gossiping, or who had painted me as the villain. For once, I wasn't stewing in my head, trying to make them understand. I was just existing. And slowly, I started to breathe again. The second week, I started working again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I took my laptop to quiet rooftops and beachfront patios, my fingers gliding over the keyboard with a kind of focus I hadn't felt in years. No interruptions, no expectations, just me and the ideas I used to love before they became ways to prove my worth. One afternoon in Barcelona, I met with a client over Zoom, a startup I had been advising on and off. They had been low maintenance for months, but during that call, the founder offered me a full-time contract. He said he wanted me to take over the entire digital growth strategy, with a generous compensation and full creative control. My jaw tightened when he said it. I hadn't even applied for the position. I hadn't tried to get it. It was the first time I realized that I didn't need the validation of the people who had ignored me. Finally, I was being seen by people who chose to see me. I accepted. By the second month, I was officially living abroad. Lisbon became my new base. A city full of color, music, and life. I rented a sunny apartment on a quiet hill with a balcony overlooking the water. I took early morning walks past the pastel-colored buildings, nodding to neighbors I didn't know in a language I barely understood, and I never felt out of place. And then the email came. It was from Ethan. Subject: if you still read these. I hesitated before opening it. A part of me wanted to delete it immediately, but curiosity was always stronger than my pride. The message wasn't long. We called it off. Not just the wedding, everything. You were right. I just didn't want to admit it. Hope you're doing well. E. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because it changed anything, it didn't, but because it confirmed something I had already suspected. The collapse wasn't just about a cancelled venue. It was deeper, rotten from the inside. I didn't reply. Some things are best left unanswered. Around that time, I started writing again. Not just emails and campaign proposals, but actual writing. I kept a journal, I wrote short stories. One night, I drafted an entire book outline about a quiet vengeance, family wounds, and the power of walking away. Maybe one day I'll finish it, maybe not. But it felt good to tell a story that didn't end with me being an afterthought. The money was coming in faster than ever. The startup I worked with was acquired, a huge payout. I was given a share of the stock as a thank you. I hired 2 assistants. I formed my own boutique agency. Clients now came to me. I didn't pitch. I didn't beg. I just said, here's what I offer. Take it or leave it. Most took it. One afternoon in early spring, I got a text from Isla. She had kept in touch. Quick hellos, envy about my travels, the occasional meme. But this time, it was different. Saw Ashley today. Not doing great. Mom's been telling everyone you sabotaged the wedding for fun. The family is a mess. You okay? I stared at the message for a long time before replying, yeah, I'm okay. And I was, because by then I had learned something I never understood while growing up in that house. Power doesn't come from making noise. It doesn't come from proving your worth to people who have already decided you have none. It comes from knowing exactly who you are and never giving that away, no matter how many people ask you to make yourself small. I was no longer the awkward brother, the forgotten son, or the unwanted extra in someone else's photo. I was Jacob Carter, self-made, unshaken, and finally, free. But freedom comes with choices. And one of those choices was whether or not to finish what I had started. Because, just as I had learned to stand on my own, a new opportunity knocked on my door. One that could turn everything upside down again. Not for spite, but for something even sharper, justice. It all started with an unexpected email. Not from Ethan this time, or Isla, or anyone from my past. It was from an old college acquaintance named Marcus Navarro, someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a decade. We had worked together on a marketing project our senior year. Nothing major, just a group job that involved creating a proposal for a fictional wedding brand. I remembered him as ambitious, a little arrogant, but sharp. The kind of guy who always had 3 side projects going and talked about leveraging connections before most of us even had LinkedIn profiles. His message started with polite small talk, but halfway through, my eyes froze on a sentence that made my pulse quicken. Small world, I'm actually working with your sister right now. She and your mom are trying to launch a family wedding business. I ran across your name while doing some research. Thought I'd say hello. A knot tightened in my stomach. Ashley and my mom launching a wedding brand. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. He even attached a link to a test website. For now, it was just a landing page with a pastel pink logo and a photo of a serene-looking Ashley in front of a borrowed floral arch. The name, Evermore and Company. It was professional, sleek, exactly the kind of thing they would do, trying to present themselves as tasteful businesswomen, capitalizing on the wedding industry as if they hadn't just scorched the earth around them. And there, in the About Us section, was a line that almost made me laugh out loud. After planning my own perfect wedding. Perfect. I stared at the words, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled through my nose. So that was what they were doing now, rewriting the past, painting over the cracks, turning failure into a fairy tale so they could turn a profit. Marcus's message continued. They're looking for someone to handle digital ad strategy and long-term scalability. I know you're busy, but I thought I'd put it out there anyway, if only to reconnect. Let me know if you're interested. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened a document and started typing, client profile, budget estimate, long-term goals, sales funnel optimization. It was second nature to me by now, something I could draft in an hour with half my brain tied behind my back. But this time, I added one more section at the end, brand vulnerabilities. I listed the weak points. Vague mission statement, unproven demographic, over-reliance on local vendors, 0 social proof. I wasn't being cruel, just thorough, just observant, strategic, because suddenly this wasn't just about moving on. It was about leverage. Over the next few days, I monitored the business in silence. I tracked their domain registration, followed the Instagram account they launched, and watched as they gathered a few hundred followers, mostly distant relatives and friends of friends. I noticed Ashley's posts used the same aesthetic. Soft focus, filtered elegance, wide but empty smiles. Every caption screamed, "Look how well we're doing without you." But underneath it all, I saw what they were really doing, scrambling to start over. Trying to polish a broken crown and pretend it had never fallen. And I had something they didn't. Time, distance, clarity, money, and a reputation they couldn't touch. I spent the next week building something of my own. Something subtle. Not a competing wedding business. That would be too obvious, too loud. Instead, I created a consulting firm with a completely different name, White Crest Digital, and started offering exclusive marketing packages for luxury event brands. I landed 3 clients in the first 2 weeks, one of whom just so happened to be expanding its operations into the same market Ashley and my mom were trying to reach. And unlike Evermore and Company, these clients had money, vision, and stability. I didn't contact Marcus again, not directly. Instead, I had one of my team members send a formal proposal to Evermore under a different name, a subtle test. 3 days later, we got a response. Ashley herself had written it. Thank you for reaching out. We're currently evaluating options for long-term partnerships. Could you provide a list of past campaigns and client results? She had no idea she was talking to me. Not yet. But that was the point. I wasn't coming in through the front door. I was already inside the house. And while they were scrambling to build something on the ruins of the lie they told themselves, we're fine without him, I was planting seeds in the shadows, learning everything I could, watching who they partnered with, who they borrowed from, how they moved, and just waiting. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't loud and messy. It's not about rage, it's about time. And I was only just getting started. The morning everything began to fall apart, I was sitting on the balcony of my Lisbon apartment, sipping an espresso as the sun rose over the city. It was quiet, almost too quiet for what I had planned. But that's the beauty of vengeance when done right. It doesn't require shouting, explosions, or dramatic confrontations. It just unfolds with elegance, in silence, and leaves its target wondering at what point exactly everything slipped through their fingers. By then, Whitecrest Digital had signed on 3 of Evermore's direct competitors, high-end, local wedding service providers operating in the same mid-luxury segment Ashley and my mom were trying to crack. We had been quietly building up their reach, siphoning off the market share Evermore hoped to claim. While Ashley focused on aesthetics and Instagram likes, our clients were signing contracts, securing venues, and building reputations. For them, it wasn't personal. It was just business. For me, it was both. But the real play began when I leveraged my connections with one of our newest clients, a wedding expo organizer with an exclusive contract to host the biggest bridal show in the state. Evermore had applied for a featured spot. And after a short call with the organizer, whom I had helped land a major partnership the week before, Evermore's application was regrettably declined due to limited space and brand overlap with existing partners. In reality, it was because they didn't meet the minimum threshold for experience. I had made sure of that when I helped update the eligibility requirements. Ashley didn't take it well. Isla forwarded me a screenshot of a message Ashley had sent to a group chat she thought I was no longer a part of. It read, "This is sabotage. We're the target demographic. Some idiot must have pulled strings to block us." For once, she wasn't wrong. But it didn't stop there. You see, when you rush to build a brand on the ashes of a failed wedding, especially one as publicly messy as Ashley's, people talk. Especially vendors, especially when payments are slow. I reached out to one of her former vendors, a floral designer named Moira, whom Ashley and my mother had ghosted after the first wedding was cancelled. I offered Moira a premium contract with one of my clients in exchange for some polite information sharing. It turned out Evermore had been using photos from styled shoots they hadn't paid for, photos they had no licensing rights to. Worse, they had been reposting Pinterest images with captions that implied these were their events. I sent these findings to the expo organizer just to clarify that they had made the right decision in rejecting Evermore. It also didn't hurt that one of my clients had a direct line to a popular wedding blog. Within a week, an anonymous article appeared online titled, "Fake It Till You Break It, The Rise and Fall of a Phony Wedding Brand." They didn't name names directly, but if you were in the industry, especially locally, you knew exactly who it was about. Engagement on Evermore's Instagram plummeted overnight. Comments were disabled. Followers dwindled. Their email list, which had barely broken 1,000, saw almost half unsubscribe in 3 days. But I still wasn't finished. The final piece came from Marcus, the guy who had unknowingly tipped me off. He reached out again, confused. "Hey, a random thing. I pitched Evermore to a VC I know, and apparently your name came up. Do you know anyone named Jake Rowland?" I smiled. Jake Rowland was the alias I used for all my Whitecrest correspondence. Not a full fake identity, just enough of a separation to protect my real name while I did some quiet damage. I called Marcus. "Listen," I said. "I didn't want to drag you into this, but you deserve to know that what they're building is a lie." I explained everything. The unpaid vendors, the misused media, the sabotaged expo application. I told him the truth. Evermore wasn't built on passion or purpose. It was built on a need to erase a failure and pretend the cracks never existed. He was silent for a moment, then said, "You want me to pull out? I want you to do whatever is best for your reputation." He didn't hesitate. By the end of that week, Marcus had pulled out of their project. And so had another partner I had discreetly approached through a mutual connection. My mother and Ashley, blind to how interconnected this industry really was, had made the fatal mistake of assuming people would take them seriously just because they sounded like they knew what they were doing. Without investors, without partnerships, without the buzz of an expo appearance to legitimize them, Evermore began to crumble. Ashley posted a story a few days later, a black screen with a white quote that read, "Some people will try to destroy what they can't have." I didn't reply. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. But I did watch silently as the Evermore website went offline a week later. Domain unregistered. Instagram deleted. All that was left was the digital ghost of a dream that was never truly theirs. And I was still on my balcony in Lisbon, drinking coffee, building something real. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't burned down their house. I had simply removed the foundation and watched it fall on its own. About 3 weeks passed until the fallout fully settled, like ash slowly falling from a fire no one saw coming. I didn't hear from Ashley directly, at first, but Isla, the unwitting informant, filled in the gaps. According to her, Ashley and my mother had an epic fight. One of those loud arguments at a local cafe where half the town seemed to hear it. My mother accused Ashley of being careless, of mismanaging everything, of blaming everyone but herself. Ashley fired back, claiming my mom had pushed her into everything. The business, the wedding, the facade of having it all together. She even pointed to her for suggesting I shouldn't go to the wedding in the first place. He was never the problem. You were, Ashley supposedly shouted before storming off. It was ironic. After all these years of sticking together like glue, they had finally come apart. Not because of me, but because they had built everything on a lie they both pretended was the truth. The truth that I didn't matter, that I didn't belong, that I could be cast aside and the world would keep spinning. Except now the world had spun, but not in their favor. Ashley moved back in with my mother a week later. She had burned through her savings trying to keep Evermore afloat. Ethan was gone from the picture completely. Not just blocked, but rumored to have moved away for work, cutting ties cleanly. The dream wedding, the dream business, the dream life, it was all gone. Replaced by a mutual resentment and the kind of quiet bitterness that grows when no one wants to admit they were wrong. My father emailed me. Not a call, not a heartfelt letter, just a short, awkward message. Hope you're doing okay. Saw about Evermore online. Your mom's been quiet. Ashley too. You were always the smartest one. Wish I had seen it sooner. Dad. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say to the man who had stayed silent for decades and only found his voice when the house was already on fire. But closure doesn't always require a conversation. Sometimes, it's just a line you draw in the sand and walk away from. Back in Lisbon, I kept building my company. By the end of the year, we were managing clients in 6 countries, with a months-long waiting list. I hired a team of 9, mentored young creators, and finally, started building the kind of legacy I used to dream of as a kid, sitting in silence at family dinners while everyone laughed around me as if I were invisible. And one night, 6 months after it all came crashing down, I got a text. It was from Ashley. A single line. Was it you? I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it without replying, because she already knew. And I no longer needed to say anything. She could shout into the void, rewrite the history again, blame everyone but herself. But the truth would stay with her in the silence. And I had already had my final word. Not spoken, not shouted, but built. I wasn't their ruin. I was their reminder.